I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor, the podcast.
Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Fantastic. Trying to figure out what universe we live in, whether it's a universe of all things political, whether it's a universe of two sets of scales as they relate to law and how certain people are treated. And when I say certain people, I mean people of power or people of commonality. If you're just a commoner, you seem to follow under a different set of rules.
So you're saying there's two sets of scales of justice?
There are two sets of scales of justice. And the folks that are at the upper end or the, would you call them larger set of scales? Definitely two different sets of scales.
I see. I definitely agree that it's been feeling like there are two sets of scales of justice, that when they want to put the regular folk on the scale to see which side it tips to, and then you have all of the super elitists, which includes the political types. I know a lot of people equate elitists to rich or wealthy, but I believe our political types are in or on a set of scales of their own. And it takes more than a finger to push down on that scale. It takes the whole weight of the political system for somebody to actually feel any sort of pinch of pain.
Yes, and you have to be a major contributor to a crime or an injustice if you're in the political realm to actually have someone hold you accountable for your act.
Or essentially the wrong kind of crime, because we have, if Hunter, this is not my words, I already heard this from somebody else, but if Hunter Biden were a Republican, he would already be in jail. And what that really says to me is that not so much that Republicans are held to a lower standard per se, but they're held closer to an equal standard of justice with regular folk, that if they do something wrong, they are more than likely to be held to account for their wrong. Now, they're still a level above common folk, don't get me wrong for that. But then you have these, not always just Democrats, but these super elitists that just don't seem to have to run by anybody else's rules. And by anybody else, I mean all of the same rules and laws that the common folk have to run by. And they can get away with anything.
I would say you're correct, and that's well put. And they do seem to be held to a different standard in just the common Republican and or someone that has not been in office or been back in the D.C. establishment for years and years. Because it's the Schumers, the Pelosi's, the Kennedys. Who else can we throw in that mix?
I mean, really the Bidens, because at this point, Hunter Biden has been, not just Hunter Biden, but the entire Biden family that has just put out, if you look at the Newsom being the Pelosi, but he got to do things that if others did under California, when we were all under the thumb of Newsom, you could not open your business or the fine police were there writing you tickets and shutting you down. Yet he ran his business. He opened his business. You could not go out in families or parties of 10 to any place, but he went out and celebrated a birthday party for someone, a really close friend. And he was at, I think, a party of 12 or 14, when at the time, us regular folk could not go out in 10 or more, and that was 3 household max. And he had multiple beyond the 3 households. And that was a finable offense. And he did not have a worry, not a care.
Right. But whoever came up with the quantity or the number of people.
He did.
Assimilate. It's ridiculous. I know he did, but it's absolutely ridiculous.
He couldn't even abide by his own rule.
Correct. And we've gone over this before in previous podcasts, just like when you go into a Costco or you went into a Walmart and there was plexiglass in front of the registers. Well, I'm sorry. That does not stop the COVID virus from going into the glass and not jumping over to the person behind it and the person to the left and the person to the right and all 500 of them that are in line.
Right.
So keeping it balanced down to 10, 5, or 100, it was ridiculous.
It did get very ridiculous. And I know you were more pointing out all of the families, all of those politically connected types. And it's kind of funny when you think about politically connected types and you don't even realize at certain points who's connected to whom. Now, who is one of our former leaders, Ryan? Do you remember Ryan? He's from
Paul Ryan?
Paul Ryan. He's from what, like a
Wisconsin.
decade back now?
Yes.
He is married into leftists, even though he was a Republican. But he's married into big family. And then when we talk about people like Bill Gates, even though he's not technically political, he's married into Heinz, the Heinz family. So it's not just people in a bubble. They're all interconnected and, if you will, married to each other, even if they're not actually married. They're all so connected to each other that when they create rules, they create laws, they create carve-outs and all of this, they're married into their carve-out.
Yes, and you can say that with our previous president, Donald Trump, even though he was not a politician per se, he had donated to political campaigns for decades.
Yes, he donated to leftists, he donated to rightists, he was not wholly discriminate.
Made him a politician, not in the literal sense, but in the figurative sense, because he did what he did to reach a political end or a financial gain or a business end.
Right. And that's what they do. They donate to whomever they think is going to ultimately vote and push, not just vote for their cause, but push for their cause to be forwarded, which is to get more money, because they're not donating to these political types to say, hey, could you please hurt my business? I would appreciate it if you would hurt me some more. That's not why they donate.
Please find me. Please find me some more. Please take some more money out of my pocket. And I was just talking about that with somebody today, talking about taking money out of your pocket. Had something to do with a certain type of tax. And it's like these municipalities, these states, these feds, they come up with every scheme possible to separate you from your hard-earned money.
Right. There is no end for them.
No, and then you have politicians at the upper end coming up with every scheme they can to keep their money, but take yours.
Right. They definitely don't want to lose theirs. Yes.
Yes. That's basically what the Bidens did through Hunter, who I don't care what college he graduated from, what his supposed educational background is. He's a scammer. He's a schemer, and he's corrupt. And that's why his family, i.e. the older Bidens, his uncle and his dad, used him for monetary and political gain.
Right. He was the vessel because Joe Biden's brother was already known to use his brother's name for money. And then essentially when Hunter Biden came of political age, I don't mean of age 18, but of political age, and he was old enough and starting to become connected enough, he just started surfing that same wave of his father's name. Because none of us would care who the name Hunter Biden was if it wasn't for Joe Biden, right?
Correct.
So he came of age and he started doing what his uncle did. He probably learned it. I'm sure they have a little class. His uncle's like, here, nephew, let me teach you how we do this. And then he started, okay, I can go to China. I can go to Ukraine. They were investigating him out of Ukraine, and Joe Biden's like, hey, I'm going to get this prosecutor fired. And lo and behold, it all happens that way.
Yes. Well, it's not just the Bidens, though. Apparently that's pretty commonplace back in D.C., and they're corrupt to the point that they could break the law technically and get away with it. Because the Clintons did it, the Kennedy, all facets of people back there that have been in office for years have figured out this scheme. And I'm sure if you dive into the New York Senator Schumer. He's probably done the exact same thing for his family members. The only thing
Yes,
is
I'm sure.
he's probably a little bit better at keeping it banded, narrow focus, so he doesn't see much light on what he's doing with his family.
Yeah, and who Maxine Waters, known for doing it, hiring her daughter. Her daughter does political advertisements for her, so that's one way her daughter gets paid. So Maxine Waters takes in the funds and then funnels the funds, the political funds. So instead of having to spend them on politics per se, gets to pay her daughter an amount of money. And I'm sure that many of these political types hire in family. In fact, we just had who I believe it was Cori Bush hired her now husband to
Oh, it was her
provide
bodyguard.
security. Provide bodyguard status and security when he wasn't licensed to do so. So I could run for office and then say, my husband's my bodyguard. Here's some money, husband. Stick next to me this whole political time. You don't have to be licensed. You don't have to do anything. I'm going to call you my bodyguard.
Well, here's a 411 for all of the voting people in America. If you're tired of this stuff and you want to change it, vote.
Yes.
Vote these people out of office that you continually say are bad, and then right at election cycle, what do? They vote them right back in. So you need to finally stand up and say, you know what, enough's enough. It's interesting that we have to have a credit score in order to purchase things, in order to get better interest rates from banks or from, say, a furniture company or whatever you're doing, whoever you're doing business with. Yet they can circumvent the rules, do the exact opposite, do not have to be concerned with their credit score, on and on and on, and they get treated with kid gloves. So until we as American citizens step up and say, you know what, we've had enough of this, it's never going to change.
Yeah, we really have to step up and say it needs to change, all of it.
Basically, isn't it just like this debt ceiling discussion we've had, and now all of a sudden the deal has been struck by President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, but now some Republicans are saying that McCarthy caved.
And then they're saying that Joe Biden caved, the Democrats got nothing out of it. I'm seeing it on both sides. I'm seeing where they're saying that Republicans are saying that either Biden caved, that McCarthy caved, and then Democrats are saying that Biden caved. And so they're listing like the top 7 things that we see out of this debt ceiling. And this is, mind you, from a Republican perspective, but a debt ceiling raised until the end of 2024. 2-year spending caps, which will mean non-defense spending levels will remain flat for the next year and increase by 1%. So then they also said changes to the work requirement for welfare program, which is that able-bodied adults ages 54 or younger without any dependents will have time limits for food stamps. Partial reduction in IRS funding. They're only reducing it by $10 billion for the $80 billion approved for funding the IRS to crack down on tax evasion by wealthy individuals. And I just used air quotes as I was speaking. And then resending unspent COVID-19 funds, and then no changes to taxes on the wealthier corporations. So there's no tax changes. This will leave intact the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And then the last thing is Inflation Reduction Act and student loan forgiveness will be maintained. So those are the 7 things that Republicans noted. And so it's being billed as a good thing for Republicans because McCarthy got Biden to cave. But then other Dems, even Schumer came out and said this is a good deal for Democrats. We should approve it. And it's the entrenched people who are saying it's a good deal, both Republicans and Democrats entrenched. But it's the outliers who are saying this is a trash deal, whether you're Republican or Democrat. They're coming out and saying McCarthy caved or Biden caved. This doesn't get us to where we want to be.
Well, the outliers, the usually 1 or 2 term congressmen or senators, should understand this is how DC works. This is how the entrenched politicians work. They make everybody think that it's a potential national disaster, which they created, by the way. And then as we tick closer and closer to actually raising the debt ceiling and coming up with cuts or coming up with more spending, one side or the other claims victory, the other claims victory, and again, we'll move on.
Right.
As
Every year we get right close to it.
Yes, as the country sinks further and further into debt, as they call it, maybe we're really not in debt. Maybe this is all a ruse by them. Maybe we have so much gold in reserves and we have so much monetary value that this is all just a scam. I wonder if anybody's ever talked about that. Is this thing reality? Is this debt clock real? Or is it fake? Maybe,
I guess we'll know what it
maybe all of
is.
this is a wag the dog.
Well, then we're all fighting, right? So it is a wag the dog. If we're all fighting, we're all looking, hey, Republicans need to win or we're going to go down in a ball of flames. Democrats need to win or we're going to go down in a ball of flames. How many times have we heard that? Like, life is over unless Democrats win. Life is over
Yes,
unless
and
Republicans
that was a discussion I had with somebody this weekend while I was out boating. Was that, oh my God, if the debt ceiling doesn't get passed, my Social Security check is going to be late. I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. And, you can fill in the rest of the blanks. It's unfortunate that these people do exactly this and they tug on the heartstrings of people that pretty much live from payday to payday or Social Security check to Social Security check.
Right. If you're living
yes,
paycheck to paycheck, and you're absolutely living, and this isn't just true Social Security. So VA benefits, so this is something that directly impacts me. They said also VA checks to be cut. VA disability stops. And if you're federal government, you hit the debt ceiling, I believe there could also be furlough on the federal government. So potentially you would see our military checks potentially get cut and other government agencies. If we hit a certain point, the government is supposed to shut down, essentially. So anyone living paycheck to paycheck could be swamped and out money, and they barely swimming, don't know what to do. Like, not everybody just has millions of dollars in the bank that they could turn around and just say, this is no big deal. And that's what they do to all of us, right? Like, my paycheck or my disability check or my Social Security check, my military check is about to be cut. What do I do?
right. And why do we not make sure that there's rules in place that the congressmen and senators do not get a paycheck?
Oh, absolutely. They shouldn't get paid. If all of us are worried about where our next food is going to come from because we're about to lose our money, why should they have anything? And then they're just fighting. And this is what gets us all mad at each other. It's the Democrats' fault and it's the Republicans' fault. And if you're a Democrat, you are going to believe it's the Republicans' fault. And if you're a Republican, you are just like, hey, it's the Democrats' fault.
See, and
On
this is Middle Eastern style tactics, because this is Iraq and Iran and the Sunni against the Shia. This is exactly what this government wants. It is the Sunni against Shia, or it is the right against the left. And then you have all the little subsets within the right and the left. So then you have multiple tribes fighting, basically. And you come up with no real solution, because all you're doing, again, is kicking the can down the road. And we didn't have a podcast, unfortunately, during the Obama era, but this is the exact same scenarios of what happened during this era.
And so, very, very true. And while we did not have a podcast, what we did have is a federal government worker who had to live with every time they said that they were going to do a government shutdown, and we would get our notices and we would get told what it's going to mean to us and how it's going to impact us. So I wish people would I really want everyone to understand that this is not new. We've gotten a little bit closer at this point to a debt ceiling problem, but it's not new. And we've been fighting, and each side always points to the other. It is always everyone else's fault. Well, the reality is it is our Democrat leaders' fault. It's our Republican leaders' fault. It's our president's fault, because they all have to essentially get together and agree on something in order for us to move forward. Now, first, the House has to pass. The Senate has to affirm and pass that. And then the president has to sign it. All three play a role. And these leaders just toy with us and get us all mad with each other. Happened under Obama, happened under Clinton, and we just kick the can down the road. Republican, Democrat, although the last few times, I think it happened once under Trump too. I'm trying to remember my furlough notices. It's hard to remember all of them because it kept happening. But
Well,
they all do it.
Do you think that we have more money coming into the coffers than in the history of this country? And by coffers, I mean tax revenue.
I do, but I also am a firm believer in the fact that it is never enough.
Right. But what I was going to get at is there's no reason for us to ever get close to defaulting. That is a false flag and a misnomer.
Right. If
We
we're close to
have-
defaulting,
yes.
how do we have so much money to send to every other country?
Yes, that means we have no revenue. We have no cash flow. If you're a business and you have no money in the bank, then you're not doing well, and it's time to think about liquidating assets and changing direction. When you're a country that generates and brings in more tax revenue than the history of the world, this default thing is a bunch of hooey.
Definitely agree.
Speaking of hooey and being confused and not understanding, and my confusion, Senator Feinstein has been very confused about VP Kamala Harris's participation in a tie-breaking vote. And I'm
She
looking at
doesn't
her-
understand why she's there. Why is
No,
Kamala
and
Harris president?
they just did a poll, and I don't love polls. Is about 60% to 70% of the country, according to this poll, feels she's perfectly capable of performing her job.
That's because they don't see who is actually performing her job for her.
Yes. And you know what? She may have been a great senator for California, for the ones that voted for her, because they definitely got what they paid for. However, at this day this time in the game with her age, she's done.
Yeah, she has been saying she doesn't understand why Kamala Harris was throwing the tiebreaker. She was asked how she was doing now that she was back at the Senate and working, and she claimed never to have left, that she was always there, and that the person that was talking didn't know what they were talking about. Almost like she didn't know that she had been absent for however many weeks that she was absent, however many votes that she missed. She had no idea that she'd even been gone. Nevertheless, why Kamala Harris would be present doing tiebreakers. She's done. Not done with life. Go live your life. Get your retirement. Go live your best life in California. But she is done. She has no idea who she is and why she's there.
No, she does not. And there's some that are much younger than her that unfortunately fall into the same category.
Oh, you mean like Fetterman?
Yes.
Fetterman is also there, and I am sorry for his health condition. I'm sorry that he had a stroke. I wish him nothing but a healthy and good recovery. I really and truly mean that. And I also want to say that he should not be representing the populace of Pennsylvania and all Democrats, because he votes Democrat. So when they want something passed, he's a Democrat voter. And all Democrats for the United States, when he cannot string together a sentence, he speaks incoherently at the Senate hearing. He dresses in shorts and a sweatshirt, and they're just happy he showed up, and it doesn't matter that he's not in, appropriate wear for the job. Oh, well, at least we have a body. Why is that that's the bare minimum for the Democrat Party? They're breathing. Great. Can we wheel them around in a wheelchair? They don't have to even speak coherently. We don't care. Can we push them from site to site? Okay, that's all we can ask for. Great. Show up.
Right. It's interesting. You articulated that very well. And during previous discussions and podcasts, I used to talk the exact same way, saying, I feel sorry for Fetterman. He needs to go home. He needs to take care of his health. He needs to be removed from the Senate and other things like that. And I've come to the conclusion and decided, I don't feel sorry for Fetterman. I feel sorry for the people around him that are making this possible. Because if these folks would step aside, step away, he would not last 2 weeks in the Senate.
Right. Everybody else is running the whole show. He's not running any portion.
He's running nothing. Just like, unfortunately, it's the exact same way I feel about our current president is I don't support what he stands for. I don't believe he legitimately won in the manner with which you traditionally win the Electoral College. He is not here. He's partially here. And I blame his wife and I blame his handlers for the way that they're running things right now. Because it's very sad that you would put over 300 million people in jeopardy with potential wars, with a terrible economy, with the prices of everything escalating. And they think it's perfectly okay to keep that power base at the risk of destroying all these humans, all these folks, these Americans, these people, use whatever vernacular, call them whatever you choose.
It's a good point. Very good point.
Yeah. And you know what? Like I keep saying, there comes a point in time when people have to stand up and say enough. And I'm not saying a January 6th type enough is enough. I'm saying that if the voting system is the way we vote these people out, then we need to stand up firm and strong by the millions and vote and say, you guys, you know what? We've had enough of this. We've had enough of paying vehicle registrations for a car that's basically a piece of junk here in California that costs you $300 a year to register, plus your smogs, plus all your other stuff. And you just start tacking on all that for all these poor folks. No wonder there's so many homeless. No wonder there's so many people with mental issues. These government entities, local, state, and federal, are tacking so much burden on everybody that people are just cracking. They're busting at the seams.
Right. And if you do point out that something's happening, if you do point out that someone's doing something that would hurt people, you're just told to put up and shut up. So if you're a left winger, you're supposed to vote yes, no matter what. What is that? Vote blue, no matter who. So then whatever they want, whatever their policies, whatever their ideas, whatever the whim at the time, because it's a blue person, you vote yes, and then they turn around within your state and within your federal government and always vote together in block. Or you're Republican and they say these are the things that Republicans stand for, whether or not you wholly agree, vote yes, no matter what, these are our things. And then they vote yes, even if you don't wholly agree one way or the other. And then you end up, as you just noted, in a situation, you're like, how did I vote for someone who was going to quit taxing me? But yet I ended up in a situation where I'm double taxed no matter what. I end up with a car registration I can't afford. I end up with gas taxes that are the highest they could possibly be. I end up having to pay smog every time. I end up with, insert this tax and that tax and another burden. And it falls under it's never enough. And now, after all of that, you have to go electric. California, you have to go electric. Well, what does that mean for you? Well, they're saying you're not paying the gas tax, so they're trying to look at another way to tax you. Go green, that's great. We need another way to tax you because our gas tax, which was to discourage you from using too much fuel, it wasn't really the goal, but that was our stated goal. But now we need more money from you. So you have your registration, your car costs more money from the get-go because it is an electric vehicle. So you're going to pay more registration from the get-go. Your bill's going to be higher. Congratulations. It's already higher. It's more taxes. And then you didn't pay a gas tax, and now they're looking at you for a mileage tax. It's already under review, and they're already having people pilot it. So it is going to happen. It's going to happen sooner rather than later. And we already have tire taxes for the way you use your tires. We already have battery taxes. So guarantees they're going to have an electric battery tax out there for your electric vehicles. Never enough. Oh, you want to charge at your home? PG&E is already finding a way to charge you at higher rates because you dare to charge at your home. Higher rates there. So everything you do is going to have an added burden.
Yes, that's tier 2. Yeah, that's tier 3. Oh, well, we're going to find out further down the road. Tier 3 is not working. We're not getting enough revenue. So let's go to tier 4. And then when we get to tier 5, we're going to go back to, you don't need to have solar on your home. We have it covered.
Right. We created a solar field for you. So we're going to tax you because you're using our solar field. Whether you chose to or not, doesn't matter.
That's
We
my
found a way
ransom, isn't it?
And look at our gas tax. So if you look at just our gas tax, that was supposed to be to help the roads. We were supposed to pay the taxes to have an extra to fix all our roads up in California. Well, guess what? They took that money and put it elsewhere. So then they nicely said to all Californians, hey, we have bad roads, so you need to pay a higher tax, special tax, in order to get good roads. And then all of the lovely people of California bought into that line of, my opinion, rubbish. But they bought into it, and so they agreed to increase our taxes, and almost immediately they started taking that money too and putting it elsewhere. That's a separate problem of they get to do whatever they want with the money instead of what actually it needs to go to. But we are getting overly taxed. We're not seeing the benefit. And then in the end, where does that leave people? Too taxed, not enough, nothing to show for it. And they still have problems. Homelessness, carless, the bus system not getting them to where they need to be, so then they can't get to the job that actually pays good money. Harm all around.
Yes, and you have, let's be honest, you have different tiers of educational level with people. So the folks that are at the lower end, and now I finally starting to realize that ones that are at minimum wage or a few cents or above are the ones that generally end up hurting the most because they cannot afford all these things.
Right. They definitely can't afford it. And what is our educational system doing? Well, if you look at the Bay Area, they've decided that if your kid is smart enough to do algebra before they reach high school, we don't care. And in fact, we're not going to lift kids up and get more kids learning algebra before they hit high school. We are going to say nobody can have an algebra class until they hit high school. So we're dumbing people down in our educational system instead of lifting people up. Oh, hey, we have 10% of the kids doing algebra, 20% of the kids doing algebra before high school. How can we lift more up and educate people better? They'd say it more better or greatly educate people. No, Bay Area is like, how can we bring everybody down below the algebra level?
Well, that's what socialism and communism does for you. It does not elevate people. It makes everyone equal, so you're all equally sharing the burden and you're broke. And there's that upper 0.5% that are, quote, the elitists, and they're the ones that actually enjoy the fruit of everybody else's labor.
Well, right. Because they're kids, do you think they're going to that public institution that forbids them from learning algebra? No.
Nope.
Do you think Newsom's kids are going to public school and being forbidden from learning algebra before 9th grade? No. Do you think any of our well-educated leaders, political type, are saying, hey, send my kids to public school and don't let them learn algebra before they hit high school?
No,
No.
they pretty much 100% go to private school.
And when one leader, a leader in Georgia, she's a Democrat, pointed out the fact, and this is Georgia, like a state house, not Georgia going to our House of Representatives or Senate, but she pointed out that she was voting against what all Democrats were supporting because all of those people who were voting to keep kids out of having the opportunity to learn privately were sending their kids to private school. And so it was school
Absolutely.
choice. So she's like, kids should have school choice. Our leaders and representatives, our Democrat leaders and representatives are giving their kids school choice, giving them private school, being able to put them there, but they didn't want everybody to have that opportunity. So that was one voice out of the many to go opposite.
Well, at least there's one.
Starts with one, right? Hopefully we can get more.
And hopefully you can get it to grow from there. Just like if you go to a state that has banned transgender female athletes from competing in a women's college sports, Alabama bans transgender female athletes from women's college sports. And that state already has a K through 12 regulation in place, which it's not about the transgender person. It is about equity and fairness, having them play under a different gender identity. Because if you are a biological male, you should not be competing in women's and girls' sports in Alabama. It's fairness, plain and simple.
Right. And we need to see more of that across the United States. So here in California, we just had the CIF, the conference, where as you go up regionally and into the state championships, you have to place high, first, second, and third, I believe, in order to move up. In some cases, it's only first and second, and you move up from your local to your city to your county, etc. And we saw two biological men who were pushing out biological women because they ranked high enough in order to place for state championships. Why is that important in California? Well, all you have to do in California is say, I'm a girl, and they have to let you compete. Now, do you really believe if Mike Tyson said, I'm a girl, and then went and boxed in women's boxing, I'm a woman, that it would be like, oh, okay, no problem, go box. Anyone can stand up to you, Mike Tyson.
He would win every match without fail.
And I believe women are great and we are equal, but we are equal in honestly different ways. There are certain physical limitations to us as women. I love us. I want us to be equal, but to say we are physically pound for pound, boxing for boxing, running for running equal would be a lie. And Alabama is on a good track. California needs to follow the same track. It is not about denying transgender rights. It's about talking about how we are different. And we are.
Absolutely. And honestly, in my simpleton approach and opinion, transgenderism has nothing to do with athletics and sports. Those should be treated as two separate items and handled accordingly. And like that state house representative basically said, that I kind of paraphrased, is it's not fair for women or girls, young girls, to have to compete at a high level against biological males. Whether they've started some type of hormone therapy or not, they're still, like you said, and we've said on multiple occasions, they're still bigger, they're still stronger, they're still faster, they're better athletes. And not better in the sense that a woman is not phenomenal in the same type of sport, but you cannot put the two side by side and compare athletes.
Which is why we've had separate men and women's sports for decades. And we had to fight for Title IX. We had to say that not only are we equal, in a way we are separately equal, where we need our own sports. So we have the same sports offered, but for men and women, and that we don't have to cross compete because it would take out opportunity for women. And there are certain sports that solely exist or started to exist to differentiate between men and women. Softball, underhanded pitching versus overhanded pitching. Softball is most closely aligned with fast pitch anyway. Female sport. Baseball is more closely aligned with a male sport. And in fact, if you look at the bases and the pitching mound of both, they are different distances apart. They are not the same distance. And in fact, you have a mound where you have a literal mound for baseball and you don't have a mound for fast pitch. You have different spacing options depending on ages, but you're running from first, home to first play is different, even from a lot of times whether there's grass or dirt and where it's located is different. How far your wall is to the back of the field is different because of our physical differences.
That would be correct.
And that's just one sport.
Well, let's just see right here because I don't recall the numbers off my head. Okay. So a ladies softball field from home plate to the outfield generally is for fast pitch is 185 feet to 235. Female slow pitch is 250 to 275. Male slow pitch is 275 to 300. Now let's just take a gander at men's baseball.
Oh, it's got to be like 10 feet because they can't hit very far.
Yeah, it's about 400.
So you're already at 400 feet.
Baseball outfield distance. Well, that's the plate dimensions. Even the plate dimensions are
different.
Different. And NCAA Division 1 and 2, this is just college. Center field's 400 feet.
For baseball.
For baseball.
Okay.
For baseball. That's men's college baseball, NCAA Division 1.
And something I learned recently too was that, and I in all my years, even though I ran track and in elementary school, junior high, I did not realize this. Boys and girls hurdles are actually different sizes.
Yep.
I didn't know that. I did not know that until recently, until there was a male hurdler running as an identified female. Like, okay, so they have an advantage when they get to run and have a shorter hurdle. So they're generally speaking taller, and now they're running off a shorter hurdle. They have an advantage for the average female who is not on average as tall as them.
Yes, everything's different. Hence, that's why we're built different. That's why our structures are different. Generally, our heights are different. And 100% one is stronger than the other. You have an aberration occasionally where you have one that a young lady that may be stronger than a bulk of males, but that's an outlier. That is not common.
If it were common, we would see more now that it's been opened across the military services. We would see more female Navy SEALs. If pound for pound, dollar for dollar, we were equal. And I love my military. I love my women. I believe that we can do tremendous things, but I am not so naive or so up in my own, what is not high off my own supply. What's the other one? Just like so high on myself that I think that we are all equal. I would love it if we were. I would love to think that we could all do everything in equality. But the truth is, we are not physically equal. There will be the outlier. Yes.
Yes. One of the standards I heard, or one of the discussions I heard once from some former SEALs, is they would have to knock the standards down almost 40% to get most highly athletic females to pass.
Right. And something that I learned about our bodies, women's and men's, is that the reason why female body standards were allowed to be, I hate to use the term fatter, but I'm going to use that just for this argument. The reason why we're allowed to be fatter is, or body percentage, we're allowed to have a higher amount of fat, which is what I mean by that, is because we start losing bone mass once we get down to a certain body fat percentage. And that makes us very unhealthy, brittle bones and problems. So you can't say, on one hand, these men can be at this body fat percentage. So we can't make women be at that body fat percentage because we're actually breaking down their bones. So
what you're saying is, if we'd have left well enough alone, everything would be just peachy.
Yes. If we would just say like, hey, we need you to be fit and we need you to be healthy and we need you to complete these tasks. We don't need you to be this specific body fat percentage. But if you can do these tasks and perform these things, okay, let's move forward. Great.
Well,
but we want to let's be absolutely specifically equal in body fat percentage. We're going to literally break down women's bones to do that.
Yes. And let's expound on that or carry that just a touch further, because one of the athletic groups that I watch a lot is CrossFit. And CrossFit, for the elite athletes, they do some phenomenal stuff, males and females. They're very, very tough.
100%.
They've even tried, they being military groups, have tried with a group of very highly fit CrossFit females to go into special forces. They've tried SEALs, they've tried Marine Recon, they've tried Rangers, 101st Airborne, all the different groups. And I believe maybe a couple have passed Ranger school, if I recall right, but almost
there have been females that have passed Rangers.
Yeah, almost all of them have failed, though, to complete all the evolutions. That's not that's saying something, but there's also hundreds upon hundreds of guys that fail as well. They're even not as strong as them females. They fail too, but that means that the schools, as the criteria is set, is working.
Well, right. And if you look at just by sheer volume, just by sheer number, and I know we've talked about this previously, where how many, like the number one woman for running, the fastest 100-meter runner, the fastest runner for women of the last 120 years, I think, since we've been keeping track. She ran at a pace that was on par with like 67, almost 6,700 other men. Could either run her pace or run faster. Just one female. So if you're looking at your ultra elite, your fastest, your strongest, and putting all of that up, women are not going to be there by sheer volume. Because even our fastest, if you only required a certain run time, women are already at a disadvantage.
Right. You have thousands that are going to be able to surpass that.
Yeah. So just by sheer volume.
That's volume and that body type, and that is the way things are meant to be, unfortunately.
We're all made differently.
Yes. They want to be at the top of the pile, and they could be at the top of their pile. They just can't be at the top of everyone.
Correct. A woman will never be the fastest person in the world.
No.
by the way we're structured and built, or the strongest person in the world by the way we're structured and built. But it doesn't mean we don't have other attributes and other things to offer to everything as a whole. Like, we don't have to be absolutely exactly the same in order to offer something good, in order to bring something good to the table.
Correct.
I don't know. That's where we get it wrong, is trying to be exactly the same. We're not meant to be.
Looking through news, I always pick and choose the news that really interests me. And every once in a while, one catches your eye. You just read the headline or the sentence, like in world news, North Korea missile launch that puts South Korea and Japan on high alert, ends in failure. When are they going to realize that, I don't think this guy is capable of doing much of squat, to be honest with you.
Kim Jong-un?
Yes, I believe he could probably launch a few to do some damage and unfortunately kill quite a few people. But I think the sum total of the parts, he's mostly all lip service. Because, we could put one boomer or submarine.
Oh, a submarine. We're not talking about boomer like an age group of boomer. You mean?
No, not a boomer. I mean a submarine. There used to be different classes. I've been out of the military for a long time. There was a boomer class, there was fast attack class, and I'm sure
100%. I was just thinking of
I know,
people saying, "Hey, boomer."
They could launch boomers at him. Old people.
Just a bunch of old people are going to be just like launched one by one, and okay. Reality though.
If you pulled all the people that don't want to be part of this scheme that he's part of, they're just unfortunately being drug along because they live there and they're being starved to death. We could park one submarine close to his coast. When I say close, 3,000 to 5,000 miles away.
We can be closer. I mean, we can be in the sea of Japan.
But one sub could absolutely annihilate a majority of his country.
Well, the thing is, you'd want to hit Pyongyang, which is where he's likely to be. So, like the capital. You'd want to find out where he is and where his sister is, where his wife is, where his kids are. Because
right. It's sad, though, that we have to reflect on things like this, and we continuously have to be concerned about somebody launching a missile or somebody, attacking us with warships or doing psychological warfare or this or that. It's the Rodney King thing. Every once in a while I have these epiphanies that, can't we all just get along? If our CIA and some of these other operatives are as good as we think we are, eliminate the threat, take care of the problem.
The fact that, what's his name? The basketball player who has like the piercings and the tattoos. He doesn't play anymore. He's retired.
That's Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman. Yeah, Dennis Rodman. If he has met Kim Jong-un, you can't tell me that we can't get to the guy. If and I know it's terrible to say, hey, let's go assassinate or let's go have a talking to this world leader. But we're talking about the guy who imprisoned entire generations. So you're talking about the grandpa, the parent, and the grandkids, 3 generations. If someone's caught doing a wrongdoing in prison, and in prison there, it likely means death. And just recently it got out, and I don't know how it got out, but someone was able to spirit the information out that somebody had a Bible in North Korea, and that imprisoned all 3 generations. And we're talking like a 2-year-old child is now in prison, likely for life until their death, for one of the parent folk, grandparent or parent, having a Bible. Let's deal with this person who's willing to imprison babies to death.
Right. And unfortunately, his type is all over the world.
That is true. We have it in China, the Uyghur Muslims. Same problem.
There are dictators everywhere that these people get power, and they are full of psychobabble. And what they think is their way of life is the grand way of life, and it's not. It's keeping all of their people oppressed, taking free money from other countries like us that feed them money so they don't starve their citizenry, which they starve them anyway.
Right. Okay, we won't send them money. We'll just send them food supplies. Who does the food supply go to? They're military. They're elitists. They're wealthy. They're ultra elites are the ones who get that food for the starving population. And the starving population, what do they have to do? They literally have to bag their own excrement for fertilizer, but then they have to give it over to government in order for the government to have the fertilizer. That is what they have to do. And if they don't bring enough per week, they can get in trouble with their government. And that is 100% factual for anyone who thinks that I'm talking unfactually. And it is crazy talk, but it is real.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we've come to this, and it happens around the world forever and ever and ever. This is a cycle that just doesn't seem to stop.
Well, let's segue into what's happening here in the United States. So what happens when we do a state of emergency? Something that we found out over the last couple of years, we get to declare a state of emergency. The governor of California has done it. The president's done it. And then they get to do nice special things during their state of emergency that they couldn't do otherwise. So what has North Carolina decided to do recently? Well, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper declared a state of emergency. What happened in North Carolina, you might ask? School choice. School choice happened. Republican lawmakers, mostly Republican, passed a bill, and they have a veto-proof majority. So they passed a bill that would allow school choice. So even a veto from the governor, the Republicans can turn around. They have a veto-proof majority. They can still pass it. So what was the governor's thought? Okay, I'll declare a state of emergency and say that public education is a state of emergency. So state of emergency declared. Therefore, a veto-proof majority does not matter. I can stop school choice. How's that for abuse of power? It's been held executive orders for hurricanes and pandemics, but now you can use it for anything you want. Everything's an emergency. Declare a state of emergency. So imagine that abuse of power.
Corrupt. That is a 100% abuse of power. And hopefully, like I said, that those folks there will realize that no, this is not what we want during the next election cycle. Boot him out.
We need to have both Republican, Democrat, Independent. Well, I said both, so I'm going to give 3. Republican, Democrat, or Independent. Anyone does that, regardless of who, they should be gone.
Yes.
Okay, so have you heard about the MAGA Supreme Court?
The MAGA Supreme Court?
Yeah.
The Make America Great Again Supreme Court?
Yes. No. Apparently, the Supreme Court is a MAGA court. Oh. According to Chuck Schumer, the Supreme Court is wholly MAGA. And so that's been a derogatory term recently used to describe anything Republican-leaning or thought to be Republican. But now Chuck Schumer has said that the entire court, all 9 justices, are MAGA Supreme Court people.
So I wonder what his thought process was when the Supreme Court was basically left-leaning for 50 years.
Totally cool.
That's all good. But when the other party, who pretty much follows most of the same rules they do, when they gain power, then they're worthless.
Yeah, so I'm going to quote, the MAGA Supreme Court is continuing to erode our country's environmental laws. Schumer, that was one of Schumer's tweets. So I thought that was really interesting, considering that the court decision he was referring to was 9-0. Did you know Sotomayor is MAGA?
I did not.
Did you know that every leftist appointee was MAGA?
I did not. Maybe at that time they actually followed law.
So just the recent case. So this is, generally speaking, John Roberts is considered to be centrist left. He really sides with the left more than I wouldn't consider him Republican, even though he's appointed by a Republican. Wouldn't consider him Republican. He's centrist left.
Well, I think that was the same way with Kennedy as well.
Yes. And Clarence Thomas, I would say he leans more right. Samuel Alito, Sotomayor, definitely left. Elena Keegan, definitely left. Neil Gorsuch, even though, he's iffy. Brett Kavanaugh. So I'll stop right there. So Brett Kavanaugh, even in this 9-0 decision, actually kind of leaned left, but he wrote a competing opinion as to how he arrived at that group's decision, but they all still wholly agreed 9-0. And it was about the EPA and the definition of wetlands. And this happened to deal with a couple's property in Idaho and how the government was deciding why their property was wetlands, and they disagreed that their property wasn't wetlands. It wound its way through the court, and ultimately it was decided in their favor.
Is this one of the
Idaho.
couples that was digging a pond or diverting a creek or something? So
They wanted to fill in a bit of their land for their house. So they were filling it in. That it would, during certain times of the year, it would kind of flood, and they were filling it in because it was lakeside. And I think they were pushing the water back to the lake by filling it in.
Right.
He was a
like the property
construction worker.
Yeah, does that sound like the property next to you?
Yeah, it does sound like a property next to me. So I wonder if the EPA would come in and call it wetlands. But in this particular case, the Supreme Court decided with a couple, the Sackett family. It was Sackett beat EPA in Idaho, believe it or not. But they sided with the Sackett family, and they've been fighting this for more than a decade, that it was not wetlands, because wetlands is generally considered all the time wet, and this land was seasonally wet. So if you consider seasonally wetland always wetland, then there is a lot of property that would never be able to be built on.
Right. And I think there's current climate with the weather right now that we've had so much rain in the western part of the U.S. this year that they could try to go after that and claim a lot of the stuff wetland, when in reality it's not.
Like all of the Tulare Lake area would be wetland. It's not a new Tulare Lake, but because we've dammed up the area and it's no longer normally wet, we could consider that wetlands.
Yes, we could.
So I just thought that was interesting that when leftists, and for leftists, and even though I don't consider the other five, they say it's 6-3, but I really don't consider our Supreme Court 6-3. There are too many times that the Republicans have sided with Democrats that it's not that way for me. And I say appointees, they aren't supposed to be politically leaning. They're just supposed to abide by the Constitution.
Right. They're supposed to abide by the Constitution and interpret law as laid out.
Right. So the amount of times that they've sided to the left, and the fact that Chuck Schumer would call a 9-0 decision MAGA, it's just an abusive language almost, just to get people excited.
Yes. And the people that listen or don't listen and believe him, unfortunately, are ill-informed.
Yeah. So we've talked about on this podcast reparations coming out of California. But Cori Bush has introduced $14 trillion in reparations through Congress. So we could, if we see reparations go through, I wonder if we would see reparations via Congress and reparations via California.
Well,
Through not V, but through California.
well, if they pass a reparations bill like that, then they need to make sure that they don't tax people that their families through generations had zero to do with it.
Not only that, we need to make sure that people like Kamala Harris pay people who so she is considered our first African American VP, our first, we don't really talk about it, but our first Indian VP. She's really Indian and she is Black. But we don't talk too much about the fact that her family is really from Jamaica and owned slaves. So she directly supported colonization and slavery through her family, because we all get blamed for our family's history, right?
Absolutely.
So, but under some of these, because she's lived in California for so long and she is considered Black, and I'm not saying she's not Black, but because she's Black and lived in California so long, she would get reparations, even though her family directly benefited off of slavery and slave ownership.
That's why they really need to do the math on this, as they say. That's the thing. Always do the math to make sure we know what we're doing. Don't just start paying people at will, ad hominem, because it's going to cause more issues. And I don't mean racial issues. It's just going to cause more derision between people that are paying for this and people that should not have to pay for this.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to touch on one of the cases we talked about. The Supreme Court has decided with a grandmother who lost her home and equity because of back taxes. And then in Minnesota, the county that sold this gal's condo and kept all of the proceeds, not only what she owed in back taxes, but everything else that was made off the sale. The Supreme Court has decided with the woman who had all of the proceeds essentially stolen, that the counties can no longer pocket the balance between what the taxes owed and how much it sold for. And it was another unanimous opinion held by the court. So that was a 9-0, unanimous.
Oh,
And so we did talk about it going up to the Supreme Court, and it has been said that counties cannot do that.
Wow.
But just as you know, counties have been doing that, and they've been doing that for many years before it's made its way up to the Supreme Court.
I did not know that.
Yep. So don't pay your taxes.
Yep. I was just looking at the bibliography and the history and the personal life of Representative Cori Bush.
The same Cori Bush that paid her now husband to be her bodyguard. Yeah. Yes. What about her?
Well, she took a spanking in 2016. The United States Senate election in Missouri Democratic primary, Jason Kander won 223,000 votes and some change for 69.9%. Cori Bush won 42,000 and some change for 13%. And then she swapped over to the congressional race in the primary in 2018. She took 36% of the vote to Lacey Clay, the incumbent, who got 56%. And then in 2020, she edged out Lacey Clay, 45% for Lacey Clay to 48.5% for her. And then in 2022, the general election for 2020, she had 78.87% of the vote to the Republicans' 18%.
That's a huge
swing, huge win.
Yeah.
And same thing, different opponent in 2022. She hit right at 70% of the vote. Well, actually, in the actual general election, she hit 72 to 24. So she must have really connected with a lot of people there in Missouri, being the first African-American woman from Missouri to represent that district. She is a American politician. She's a nurse. She's a pastor, and she's a Black Lives Matter activist. So there's where a lot of your money and your support, I bet, would come from.
Well, now that they're going broke, I wonder how much support she'll have 2024.
2024, we will see. But they like tech raisers like that.
They certainly do.
You.
Yes, they do. Well, it deflects. And
Yes.
so we have heck raisers, or we have people who lie under oath. The Department of Justice has recently confirmed that they will not bring charges against a U.S. attorney who is backed by George Soros, who lied under oath about the link she was willing to use her position to influence a local election in Boston. And so when you have individuals who are not prosecuted, which is Rachel Rollins, she will not be prosecuted. She was dismissed following her resignation from her job because she was the subject of a report by the Office of Special Counsel and the Office of the Inspector General, and how she used her position, flouted ethics rules, leaked confidential information to the media, etc., collected free tickets to the Boston Celtics games, attended fundraisers for the DNC that included Jill Biden. And all of this goes on. She ultimately resigns her position, and the DOJ is like, oh, not going to prosecute. So you can use your position, abuse your position. You're of the right party. No problem.
Yes, we have bigger fish to fry, and you're not a Republican, so we're going to let you slide.
Or if you can't get out of what you did, the DOJ will just slow walk the charges. So the statute of limitations is up.
Yeah, they'll let it run 5 years plus, therefore there is no prosecution.
And that's what we're seeing with Joe Biden's son.
Yep, even though he should have been locked up a long time ago.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So something that's hit locally in the Fresno area that unfortunately we've come to see is Bitwise is now saying that they are not financially solvent at this point, and they've laid everybody off. And it really, yes, they have 4 buildings in downtown Fresno, plus they have buildings where they've been expanding at different cities, Bakersfield. There's one that they've been working on in Chicago. They've had infusions of money from big companies, but it's a case of they tried to expand too fast off of too much debt. And now they've laid every one of their workers off.
Well, that's uncool, because now you got a bunch of people that have to seek employment.
Yes. So we saw the same thing with Fresh and Easy. They expanded as quickly as possible and then filed for bankruptcy relatively quickly after that because they did so off of debt.
Well, I don't know if the barbecue place here in town from Texas has closed all of their businesses, but I know they've closed almost all of them in Fresno. And that's Dickey's Barbecue.
Oh, yeah. We saw some of those close for too fast. Off of too much debt.
Well, and honestly, the food wasn't very good either.
It was mediocre. Although in Clovis, the restaurant that replaced it was even worse. So I would take Dickey's over them, even though it wasn't the best.
It's definitely mediocre at best. That's for sure.
Sad to say.
That's for sure.
Okay, so now I'm going to segue into, now we have a presidential primary that is starting to get a little more crowded. We now have DeSantis who is declared. We have Trump who had declared before. We have, who is it? Tim Scott. We have Nikki Haley, and they're not the only one. But so we have a big field in the Republican primaries. Hopefully it gets even bigger. So we have some of the best and the brightest. Let's keep this going. But something that has been dragging down these announcements is DeSantis announced off of Twitter, and it crashed the internet for them. Kind of feel bad for how his announcement went, which was to go strictly off of Twitter, but then too many people were trying to ping it and it just crashed. We have DeSantis kind of iffy now, seeing how he'll go. He just went to Iowa to declare his first real give a speech moment. We have Trump, who's going to be continuing his running for 2024,
third go around.
His second hopeful election, but his third go around. Yes.
Correct.
He's trying to get elected for that second time. But he now has a judge who has scheduled his trial in the middle of primaries. So we'll see how that goes. It's the trial involving Stormy Daniels and whether or not he paid her off hush money. So that has been scheduled for trial. Date set right now is March 25th, 2024, which is right in the middle of Republican primary. So we have kind of a crazy field going on, not just with Trump. But
Well, we do. And Trump and DeSantis are going at it pretty good already. They're slamming each other pretty good. So, and it's interesting because they're probably going to be running mates.
You think so?
Trump, if Trump survives, and by survive, I mean these people being these Democrat operatives have been going after this guy since he announced for his first presidential run. Half of this stuff is probably crud. The other half may be reality. Or a third, and a third. Third is crud, third is crap, and the rest is reality. Well, not crap, but fiction. Because if they went after all the other political operatives like the Clintons and the Schumers and the Pelosi's, all those people would be in prison.
Yes.
They would all be in the pokey for doing something wrong. And they're just going after this guy because he's was a populist president. He's a populist leader. He has shown that if you don't follow or toe the line of political chicanery like they do in DC, you can get a lot of stuff accomplished because you cannot hide his record of the state of how hot the economy was, the state of how high Black employment, Hispanic employment, other employment, employment in general. Let's just not say all these different ethnic groups. Let's just put all the sum total of the parts together and say that unemployment was at near zero and we were firing on all cylinders across the country. We were oil independent. We were bringing jobs back to America. Everything that he said he was going to do, he did. Can he repeat it? I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see if he could.
Yes, because it's like a football coach or baseball coach that coaches and has a really good season or two or three, then leaves for a while and comes back, and he's lost the ability to keep up with the game, so he can't repeat his success. So I don't know if the man can repeat it or not, because you can rest assured that there's still going to be the Schumers and Pelosi's and them that are going to be out there to go after him for anything they can think of.
Right. And there was a new study released by the Journal for Information Warfare, the JIW. So they confirm that there is a loss of control in the New York's voter database. And the study, which was an audit of the voter rolls, found that there are hundreds of thousands of illegally generated registrations in the official voter rolls. And this was out of New York. And so I wonder how much Chuck Schumer has benefited from this. Apparently, the first time their findings were submitted, it was rejected. And the author claims for political reasons, but it has been reviewed by multiple PhDs. 3 peer review experts ended up having to review this. It wasn't just a peer review, it was multiple peers to review this. So I'm just curious on how much Chuck Schumer from New York has benefited from this problem in New York, a fraudulent voter roll.
Lots, I'm sure. For sure, he has a lot to do with this. He's benefited immensely. All these crooks do. Just like, what's her name? Crooked Hillary.
Yeah, definitely for her. And all of I was surprised, maybe surprised isn't the word, but all of these pet projects, we all know about pet projects and they're like the pig, what do they call it?
Pork?
Pork spending. Thank you. That gets out there. But Newsom wants a Delta tunnel to be expedited. And so it's a plan to build out California's clean and green future. But in order to do it faster, and since it's a pet project, he gets to pull some of the requirements that everybody else has to go through. And this is to convey water from the Delta down to Southern California. And we've had all these problems with the Delta melt. Farmers can't use the water because XYZ, the Delta smelt would be harmed. But when Gavin Newsom wants it, he's able to start taking away and expedite court reviews and streamline processes for permitting. So it's just kind of interesting how these elitists can take away certain requirements for when it's their pet project.
Well, they make the rules. They can break the rules, right?
Yeah, they know how to do it.
Yeah, and if you add up all the billions of dollars and all the jobs it's going to create for his union buds, if they would just put D-cell plants in California, Southern California, or more D-cell plants, bigger ones, we could solve the problem. Because if we're looking at rising oceans, which they say we are because of global warming, climate change, the ice caps are melting, blah, blah, blah. Well, then let's counteract that by pumping fresh water and we'll have a balance.
So speaking of balance, I did read just this week, a Danish company has claimed that they have found a way to recycle wind turbines.
Ooh.
So the claim from the company is that they found a chemical way to break down the blades, which is mostly made of fiberglass, which is why it's not ordinarily recyclable. So a chemical way to break it down and recycle them or potentially repurpose them if they don't end up breaking them down fully, it's partially, and then they can revamp them and use them.
You should cut them up in about 50 pieces and make fencing material.
So right now there's a claim. It's just a claim, but I do want to throw it out there because we've talked about these wind turbines before, that there is a claim that they can be recycled.
Well, it's cool because, I think the shelf life on those is like 20 years and there's either hundreds or thousands of them currently,
right?
But they have no place to put them.
Yeah.
They're just kind of laying them around.
So we'll see. We'll see if it happens.
That'll be interesting to see. Very cool. Very, very cool. That's all I got besides the fact that I'm so disappointed in this country. That's all I'll say. I'm so disappointed. We are so upside down. We have homeless everywhere. We have just spiraling prices that are spiraling out of control. I have a couple of my own employees that don't make enough to be able to afford graduation clothes and shoes for their sons because they're at minimum wage, and current apartment pricing here, a small 2-bedroom dump basically is running over 1,000 a month. It's insane.
Disappointed that we can do so much better.
Yes, this country can do so much better. We can send 30 million, 300 million, 500 million, 10 million, 80 million, 5 million, 5 billion, 200 billion around the world, but we can't figure out how to correct and solve our own problems here at home. I'm so tired of these people doing their little social experiments in school. Then they get out into the real world and they wreak havoc, and they're not held accountable. There's no controls. There's no responsibility. They don't have to pay for their mistakes.
And they do it again after their mistake.
Yes, it's just, like we've said many a times, wash, rinse, repeat. And I'm only thinking about this because going to work this morning and coming home, I'm looking at this local restaurant right on the corner up here and all these homeless people living in squalor. And you try to analyze just in the short 10-minute drive to work, okay, if I were in charge, how would I fix it? Well, I've talked about it. We would force them into a home. We would force them into rehab. We would lock them up so they have to get dried out if they're on drugs. If they have psychological issues, we would get them some type of help. If they're fixable, we fix them chemically or through therapy. And then if they're sufficient and good to go back into society, we let them back into society. If they crash again, we bring them back in and we do it again. But you can't just let these people live in this squalor, filthy. They don't shower. They don't eat well. Yet we're providing them with $1,000 phones so they can sit there and do God knows what on the phones.
It's true.
Last thought from me. I'm done with my ranting.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.